surface temperatures. And you're kind of seeing, it kind of looks like a bunch of globs here. The darker red represents the warmer color. When you look right there, you see that little kind of right in the middle of the darker red, the lighter red shade right through there. Well, as the tropical systems move along, especially hurricanes, they have moved along and kind of create some a cooling in their path, the upwelling of the water.
The Weather Channel. No place on Earth has better weather.
This tropical update is brought to you by Lowe's Home Improvement Warehouse. When it comes to home improvement, Lowe's knows.
Thanks for joining us on Weather Channel. Of course, it's time for our tropical update. Tropical Storm Erika. Remember this time yesterday morning, it was still categorized as a hurricane, and we knew that it would continue on its weakening process, and it has weakened now into a tropical storm, and it continues to move away now from the lower 48 and really not in the path of any landmass areas, or no landmass areas are in the path of this tropical storm. So that's the good news. It is moving to the east-northeast at about 23 miles an hour, and it is 955 miles west of the Azores Islands. So it's a long ways away even from the nearest land mass area, and that's the Azores. So really not a major threat whatsoever. You can see it's just a tropical storm now and has really started to weaken, and it should totally lose its tropical characteristics as we go through the next 24 to 36 hours. So we don't have to worry anymore about tropical storm or former Hurricane Erika. Now, we do have something else that we are watching, and that's the eastern Gulf of Mexico here. Now, keep in mind, the old surface frontal boundary, clear the coast here, and across southern Florida and northern Cuba, we have been watching this area of convection kind of flaring up, and it is possible that this system could develop here into something tropical, but for now it's not a tropical system. We will continue to watch it though, because upper air winds are very light, and of course that's what you need when you talk about a favorable environment for tropical development. So without a doubt, we will keep our eyes posted on this particular area. Nonetheless, it will create scattered showers and storms, a lot of stormy weather over the Bahamas here in southern Florida, but it's not necessarily an organized tropical system at the moment. You know, we will keep you posted on the latest development in this particular area. Now, a little farther east, we've been watching other tropical waves, but as you look at the overall Atlantic basin, this is supposed to be the most active time of hurricane season, and things are as inactive as they can get for the month of September across the Atlantic basin. We've had one tropical wave, remember, that moved across the central, the southern Aleutian Islands yesterday. Should I say, the Windward and the Leeward Islands here, the Lesser Antilles. And it did bring some squally weather, but the system has weakened quite considerably. Not a lot of convection associated with it. This next tropical wave, it has some convection, but you can see it's elongated. It's not organized, not expected to really organize into anything. And even as we keep going east toward the West African coast, we're still watching for impressive waves to come off the coast here near Senegal and the Cape Verde Islands, but nothing too impressive, even though we do have some convection here. So we'll watch these as they emerge off the coast. Of course, this is about 5 degrees latitude. Well, actually, this is about 15 degrees north latitude. This is about 10 degrees north, and most of the waves recently have been south of 10 degrees, and that has indicated that this system these systems are not in a favorable area for development, because we don't want them to be a little farther north of 10 degrees latitude in order to have a true strong beginning, if you will, as they come off the West African coast. So things are very quiet as you look at the overall picture in the Atlantic, but it's just the opposite in the East Pacific. It has been more active here than what we've ever seen. This is the strongest hurricane in the East Pacific that we've ever seen, actually, since we've been keeping records with Hurricane Linda. Maximum sustained winds up to 180 miles an hour. Now, it's a Category 5 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. It is moving to the northwest at 9 miles an hour. A very classic-looking hurricane here, as it is very symmetrical. You can clearly see the eye of the storm. A lot of subsidence taking place, so that means quickly sinking air in the middle here. So very, very strong hurricane. Category 5 again on the Saffir-Simpson scale, right off the coast of Mexico. It is moving to the northwest. It is expected to weaken now over the next 72 hours with maximum winds only about 90 miles an hour by then. But definitely we will keep you posted on this very strong hurricane off the coast of Mexico. In some way, it could affect Southern California, perhaps bring some...
Where again we have the strongest hurricane on record in the eastern Pacific and one of the strongest hurricanes ever in the Western Hemisphere. I believe the only one that was stronger was probably Hurricane Gilbert, which was, I believe, back in the 1980s. At any rate, the central pressure with Linda, 900 millibars, 26.58 inches of mercury. Maximum sustained winds, 185, and wind gusts are between 210 and 215 in the eye wall of extremely dangerous Hurricane Linda. 17.5 north, 110.1 west. It is over open water, fortunately. 365 miles south of Cabo San Lucas in Mexico. A classic picture here on the colorized satellite of red, cold. The red coloration indicates very cold cloud tops surrounding a very small eye, about 12 to 15 miles across. Again, what you're looking at here is a satellite signature of the strongest hurricane ever in the eastern Pacific Ocean and one of the strongest ever in the Western Hemisphere. Now, it looks like Linda will continue a west-northwest track for a couple of days, but by early next week, there may be a dip in the jet stream that comes far enough south that could pick up Linda and move it towards Southern California and northwest Mexico. That is one thing we will be watching very, very closely over the next couple of days, because that type of scenario is not entirely out of the question.
Channel. No place on Earth has better weather.
It's 9:30 before the hour. Thanks a lot for tuning in for the latest on the tropics. You know, on this date back in 1988, Hurricane Gilbert was churning up the Western Caribbean. The pressure on Gilbert falling to 888 millibars. We have a hurricane this time in the eastern Pacific that is nearly as strong as Hurricane Gilbert. In fact, Hurricane Linda has become the strongest hurricane ever observed in the eastern Pacific and one of the strongest ever observed in the Western Hemisphere. I believe Gilbert is the only one that has been observed with a lower pressure. The central pressure on Linda now, about 900 millibars, 26.58 inches of mercury. Because of the extremely low pressure, you would expect that Linda is a very intense hurricane. And look at the maximum sustained winds, not gusts, sustained winds, 185 miles per hour. Wind gusts top 200 in the eye wall surrounding the center of extremely impressive Hurricane Linda. Here's the updated position for you. 18 degrees north, 110.6 west, 330 miles south of Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. And Linda at this point is moving northwest at 9 miles an hour. There's a very warm eye, which is about 12 to 15 nautical miles across, surrounded by very cold cloud tops. A very impressive satellite signature of the strongest hurricane ever recorded here in the eastern Pacific, and it beats by a long ways Guillermo last month that had 140 mile per hour, 140 knots sustained winds. Right now Linda has sustained winds at 160 knots or 185 to 190 miles an hour. Where will Linda be going? Well, we have an unusual setup developing in the west, and it is not entirely out of the question that Linda at some point early next week may have some effects on Southern California and the extreme northwestern sections of Mexico. Why is that? Well, in the next couple of days, through the next couple of days, high pressure remains to the north of Linda, and the northwest track should continue. But early next week, a deep dip in the jet stream winds or low pressure trough develops off the west coast, and that could, so to speak, reach down and pick up Linda and bring it into the southwestern corner of the country. If that happens, Linda is likely to be much, much weaker than it is right now. But it is not entirely out of the question that if that forecast holds true, tropical storm conditions could reach Southern California, a very unusual occurrence. In fact, I think the last time a tropical storm affected Southern California was sometime back in the 1930s, believe it or not. So this is a forecast. This is a scenario that you folks in the Southwest should watch very closely, and we hope you tune in frequently for the next several days to catch the latest on Linda. At the very least, it may bring an end to the longest stretch of dry weather in history in Los Angeles, and at the worst, it could be tropical storm conditions over the Southwest and flooding type rain. So we will keep you posted over the next couple of days. Here's a new depression in the mid-Pacific. It should develop. And we have Typhoon Oliva, which hammered the Marianas Islands yesterday, now moving west-northwest towards Okinawa. And by late in the weekend, that island will be battered by Oliva as it continues on its track, which is expected to stay pretty steady for the next 72 hours. In the Gulf, a few thunderstorms. Winds aloft here are expected to weaken. There may be, in the long range, the slight possibility of some development. We'll keep you updated. There's a weak front in this area. The rest of the Caribbean in good shape. Tropical South Atlantic. Nothing showing up off the west coast of Africa. Things are quiet. In the North Atlantic, Tropical Storm Erika continues to move east at 17, 60 mile per hour sustained winds at about 895 miles west of the Azores Islands. Erika is still showing tropical characteristics, but the forecast is for Erika to become a strong extra tropical storm by early Saturday morning, affecting shipping in the North Atlantic. Now let's find out what's coming up at the top of the hour.
Discussion out of Southern California. Apparently there's a lot of people which are quite nervous about this hurricane here. Now, we will take it piece by piece eventually, and we'll look at the forecast, and we'll tell you about what threats, if any, will come to Southern California. Hurricane Linda, 8 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, 185 miles per hour. This is about as strong as you ever see a hurricane in the eastern Pacific. It is moving off to the northwest at 9 miles per hour, and this is the forecast track over the next couple of days off to the northwest. Here's our visible satellite picture. Island of Socorro right here. Fortunately, there are very few people on this island. It may make a direct pass over the island, the eye itself, but essentially, usually this right eye wall here on the right side with the direction of movement, that is where the highest winds will probably be. So Socorro may actually take the brunt of this hurricane. Infrared satellite picture showing what's going on here. For a while, the eye was removing itself from the center of circulation here. And what we watch very carefully is the CDO, or central dense overcast, this cloudiness associated and planted with the eye here. Well, what happened earlier is that this eye started to move away from the center of circulation, or I should say the eye was displaced from that center of the cloudiness. So for a period of time, we believe that the hurricane was actually weakening some. But what is happening now is that this eye once again is starting to bury itself toward the central dense overcast. So we believe there may have been a little bit of a fluctuation, a weakening. It may be holding its own once again. Anyhow, with this very well-defined center here, Socorro is in the northern eye wall of this hurricane. So very dramatic looking picture here. It is stretched out a little bit to the north-south, and many times that points to the direction of motion. So we do believe it is going to stay offshore of Mexico for a while. The key comes what happens later, and what we're looking at here is the water vapor imagery. California right here, Southern California. Here's the hurricane south of Baja California, southwest of Baja. And this is the feature here that we'll have to watch. A big trough of low pressure high in the atmosphere. All the forecasts that we're watching tell us that this trough will spin to the south, and that will cause a wind flow from the southwest. What we're expecting is that this hurricane will make its way to the north end. What happens there? If the forecasts are correct, it should steer the hurricane then off to the northeast some. What does that mean for Southern California? Truthfully, we don't know yet. It is possible, in the realm of possibility, there could be a minimal hurricane, but it is much more likely that as this hurricane makes its way up the coast, it is going to weaken very significantly, probably drop down to tropical storm force. The biggest threat to Southern California will be flash flooding and heavy rain. If this hurricane continues in this path like so, then gets caught up to this trough. So that is by far what we think is going to be the biggest problem, will be flash flooding and with the problems that we will find with rain. Of course, we'll keep you updated on this situation here. Heading farther to the west,
Detroit, Indianapolis, down to Lexington, Kentucky. Even ahead of this front, not a lot of activity. We may have a few scattered showers and thunderstorms through the plains and into the southwest. Monsoon is really very nice. This is the time of year it can be comfortable in the morning and at night. A little cooler northeast. A little hot out here in the plains. How about these 90s showing up by Sunday? Summer lives on. Some changes will occur by Monday as we think we'll get some of that moisture from Hurricane Linda coming into Southern California. Will the winds still be strong? Again, still in question. We're just going to have to watch it closely hour by hour, but there is a possibility that this will really diminish in strength as it heads northward over the weekend. But by Monday, we could be getting some of the effects. So that's why temperatures have dropped here. And then as that moisture comes into the Rockies, a rainy day expected here Tuesday, we transfer the rain up here and drop the temperatures in the northern plains by Wednesday. That's several days off, so that's not written in stone. That's just the first forecast on this one. Southern plains should stay very hot. Southeast, really pretty hot. So we're going into mid-September here with some warm weather. For the weekend, this doesn't look so pretty. A lot of green on the map, but most locations it's scattered, it's few, it's isolated, so not a real wet forecast. Probably the best chance of rain that could really mess up your Sunday afternoon would be from Seattle down through Astoria and maybe down to not quite to Ukiah in California. And actually Monday looks wet here too. So we put rainy, windy weather on the map for you in LA over towards Palm Springs. We could have some heavy rain out of this without a doubt, and flooding is probably the most likely outcome of what Hurricane Linda brings to Southern California. So northeast isolated storms, a weak system goes through the southeast, kind of hovers around, so isolated storms possible through Tuesday, and then we kind of diminish it right back down to Florida again by Wednesday as this next front, perhaps with some leftover moisture from Linda, enhances the rain here around Minneapolis. So yes, even as far away as Minneapolis, you could see some effects from this one. It's a powerful hurricane, and so we'll just have to watch.